Hello, and welcome back to It's a Very Exciting Time, a podcast by a UFO nerd and his tolerant friend. My name is Scott, and I've been fascinated by the phenomenon my whole life.
My name is Chuck. I'm an aerospace nerd and a tolerant friend.
We started this podcast because since 2017, there have been shocking revelations from news of secret Pentagon programs to confirmed videos of astonishing craft. In a nutshell, now that we know the government has recovered non human technology,
Or at least we will once the UAP Caucus gets their secret committee. Oh, select
select.
committee.
It raises the natural question. If UFOs are real, what else? Suddenly, some of these other parts of the phenomenon that seemed unlikely are pulled into the realm of the possible.
And they may still be unlikely. But even if it's Chinese drones and not aliens,
Woo! It's a very exciting time.
a quick reminder before we dive into it, you can find our show notes at veryexcitingtime.com or support us by going to patreon.com/veryexcitingtime, where you can also find extra content like the Q&A that we just recorded.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a wild one. We
Yep.
got way off topic very fast.
We got so messy so quickly. But
Okay. All right, Chuck. So
it's
excited
Scott.
to be back with you again.
Yeah, me too.
We've got more of a news focused podcast. We've been
Okay.
covering specific topics. So I had a little bit of stuff piled up. Um, I sat down as usual. I've got a pile of about 300 links I've bookmarked, and I've got to filter through
Yeah,
them and figure
that's
out like
normal.
what's happening and what are the themes and what's a
Mhm.
narrative I can construct around this.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really able to this time. So
There isn't one, okay.
up first, we've got quick hits.
Quick hits.
Segment
Dun, dun,
we started a
dun.
while ago and have not brought back because it kind of is not great. But hey, we got a lot of
That's where we
tiny
are.
little news bits that aren't really worth the whole segment on their own.
Alright.
Up first, a source told Ask a Poll,
Ask a
politician,
call it yeah, I don't know.
Ask a Paul.
It works better
Sounds
on Twitter.
It's not Ask a Paul, like someone named Paul. So it's got to be Ask a
Just
Poll.
just any random although, uh, look at who the first, representative they asked was.
Well, yeah.
Anna
All right.
Paulina Luna.
That was weak. That was weak.
It was not weak, it was brilliant. Carry on.
Ask a Poll asked, found, heard of, Jesus Christ, man. I'm sorry, everybody. We are off our game today. Okay. Ask a Poll heard a rumor that Representatives Anna Paulina Luna and Matt Gaetz were briefed by current military people that had video of bodies. Now,
Mm,
we have previously heard that Anna Paulina Luna and Matt Gaetz went to Elgin Air Force Base
mhm.
where they got into it with the general there. Anna
Right,
Paulina
yeah.
Luna was very upset that they wouldn't show her UFO stuff. In the end, what the base said is she didn't have clearance for it, so they pulled Gates into a room and showed him some
Mm,
stuff. Gates has come out and said he saw a video of a craft that he is confident is not made terrestrially. Um,
hmm,
Now we don't know if it's the same briefing, but probably it is. So this is kind of a new detail, adding that not only did they see video of a UAP, but that they saw a video of bodies, which would be
hmm,
kind of a big deal.
mhm.
But before you get your hopes up, you can probably guess what they both had to say about it.
Yeah.
Representative Gates's spokesperson said, "We can confirm that we had a briefing with Representative Luna. I cannot discuss. We have no comment on the contents of that briefing at this time."
Yeah,
And
makes sense.
Representative Luna, when asked about it, said, "I cannot discuss these things, but you know that. I'm sure we'll have field hearings. No comment."
So, and I'm guessing they didn't, show anything to Burchett because he would immediately be like, "Hey,
Can you
y'all, I
imagine?
saw the bodies."
Y'all, they were there. It's a cover up. Oh, man, Bridget.
Yep.
Speaking of field hearings,
Okay.
they've been threatening this for a while, right? This idea
Mhm.
that um, Congress can apparently just kind of set up camp anywhere and do a
Yeah,
field hearing. I don't
what is a
really
field
understand.
hearing?
I get the impression it's part of an investigation. They bring it up in the context of if they found out, for example, that Lockheed Martin had a UFO in a particular hangar, apparently Congress
Mhm.
can just show up and
Does it have to
do
be
a
all of Congress?
your guess is
Okay.
as good as mine. The impression I get is no. But
Okay.
we got a quote from Representative Eric Burlison, who spoke recently about the difficulty of investigating the locations of craft that have been provided to them by Grush and other whistleblowers. He said, quote, "We have been given two locations that I cannot speak of. And one of the frustrating things is what we've been told is that I can't even tell my staff about these
Mm,
locations. So if we were to try to set up a field hearing, what I've been told at this point is that by me even telling the staff what locations I want to go look at is releasing information to them about this. So this is
mm,
why this is such a frustrating topic, is that all these
right.
silly things keep getting in the way of us getting to the information. And the other thing I was told, and Grush has said, is that if we do set up a field hearing where we try to surprise visit them, they're just going to move everything before we get there.
Yeah. That sounds really frustrating, but
Hmm.
I do wonder, like, how quickly they could show up,
Right?
leave the staff out and
Hmm.
call a
Hmm.
reporter, just show up on this day, and,
Right?
it seems like they could do that. It's
Yeah,
gonna
because
be
the
yeah,
implied problem here is there's so much apparatus
right, yeah,
around a congressperson visiting somewhere that they
yeah,
would have plenty of advance notice to clear out
right.
and be like, like how many times on the X Files did they get to a location they would show up and it was just an empty warehouse,
Mhm. Right,
Uh, so it's got to
yeah,
be like that. But yeah, I gotta assume you could do it faster than that. Like, how
yeah.
quickly can you actually put a UFO on a truck and clear out? I don't know.
On the other hand,
Mm.
maybe they don't have to clear it out. Maybe all they have to do is, push the bookcase back in front of the door and, like,
Yeah,
"Oh, there's nothing back
nothing
there."
here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, Matt Laszlo of Ask a Poll, spoke to Senator Mike Rounds, who is notable for being one of only a handful of senators who sit on both the Intelligence and the Armed Services Committees, and asked him, "Are you read in on every program?" And Senator Rounds kind of chuckled and said, "Well, you never know if you're read in or not."
Yeah.
And Laszlo
That's
said, "So US contractors, there could be something that you don't know." And Senator Rounds said, "You never know."
yeah, I mean, that's kinda the rub. When you said, Senator Mike Rounds was notable for something, I really thought you were gonna say that was notable for not being named Paul. But
It's true.
yeah, anyways. Yeah, this system is maddening, but it makes sense that that's how it's designed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just as I understand it, the problem that we're facing is the vast majority of Congress can be excluded from special access programs by not putting them on the need to know list. And then on the waived, unacknowledged
Mm,
special access programs, you're not even allowed to acknowledge that they exist. It's not just that you're not read into it, like literally saying no comment is viewed
mhm,
as confirming it. You're supposed to explicitly lie and say
right.
no such program exists. So we've got ourselves in this infuriating position where, like, Sean Kirkpatrick says, "Yes, we heard about program X. And when I asked them about that program, they said it doesn't exist."
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah, you got to go further, Sean. But genuinely, not everyone has access. As I
yeah,
understand it, the only people who definitely should have access to everything, even the waived, unacknowledged shit, is the Gang of Eight.
right.
But what we have heard before is the Gang of Eight only gets information about the things they ask about. It's not like the military is proactively briefing them on every
Right.
secret program. It's just that
Right.
if the Gang of 8 shows up asking, they're supposed to tell them. But so
Yeah.
we've got this system where it's kind of unenforceable. Like, we,
Well,
at the end of the day,
yeah.
have to trust that there are not rogue, nefarious elements abusing this system. I
Right.
don't know. It's crazy to
So
me.
this one thing that so I think that's what all of this is actually about.
Mhm.
That there are rules about special access programs, and they do have to be announced, no matter whether they're compartmentalized or not. They have to be like reported on every year at a specific time to Congress, and they aren't being. And so I actually think that that's why there are senators who are like following up on this. They may also believe in aliens,
Mhm.
but I think that's what it's actually about.
No, totally, and you're actually foreshadowing some comments we'll hear later from
Really?
Representative
Okay.
Burlison talking about his concern is less about are there aliens and more about someone is hiding something, and that's a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Last in our quick hits section here, Ross Coulthart told a story
Mm.
recently.
Yes.
He's our favorite Australian journalist. Uh,
Mhm.
he told a story recently about being approached by two senior senators who thought that the AARO historical report was bullshit. Ross said, quote, "These two very senior politicians came up to me and they said, 'Oh, you're the guy that did the Grush interview.' And I said, 'Yes, that's me, sir.' And I realized who I was talking to. And these were two very senior senators, neither of whom are prominent at all publicly in the commentary on the issue. But
Hmm.
what they took their time to say to me was how they can smell bullshit when they see it." Quick, quick detour. That phrase makes no sense. Like, they
Why?
can smell bullshit. They know something is bad when they see it. They can smell bullshit when they see it. Like, I think Ross got a little tripped up there. Makes me laugh. Anyway.
Why? Do you think that you can't smell bullshit? Like, does it not have an odor?
No, it's that you can smell bullshit when you see it. Like,
Oh,
you're
smelling.
mixing your
Okay.
metaphors up there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
anyway.
What's that's so there's a term for that. It's officially called a malaphor.
Ooh,
Um,
okay, cool.
and you should absolutely look up malaphors because they're the funniest shit in the world.
There was a similar one. My mom once said, snug as a camper at high tide, which is snug as a bug in a rug,
Uh-huh.
happy as a clam at high tide, and I guess happy as a camper. But it was like
Yeah. Wow, that's like a
snug as a
triple.
camper at high tide is
Yeah.
not only mashing 3 of them together, but it's completely wrong. Like, a camper at high tide is not happy. Things have gone very wrong.
Right. Yeah, and
Anyway,
that's one of the, like, hallmarks of a good malaphor, that
right.
it's, like, broken in some inadvertent way.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Ross says these 2 very senior senators come to him and talking about the AARO report, they say that they can smell bullshit when they see it. He says, "And they were making the point to me that Congress is not letting this issue go.
Good.
And I can't say a great deal about what I know is happening, but there is a very strong bipartisan push in the Congress that it is time that basically they're not buying the Arrow Historical Review Report, which is essentially a whitewash, an attempt to put the whole subject matter back in a box and attempt to discredit David Grush and other whistleblowers. Congress is not letting go."
Fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Um, I know a lot of people are getting tired of hearing "trust me, stuff is happening."
Mhm.
But to like, change takes time, and personally, I like to hear someone say they're still committed, they're still making progress,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
rather than just not hearing anything at all. So
Yeah,
I hope people can hear this from Ross Coulthart and feel like this is a recommitment, that
absolutely.
we're still going at it.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this in the last episode, right? This idea that, like, it's natural to get discouraged when you hear people
Mm.
just continuing to say, "Trust me, trust me, trust me, trust me," and
Yeah,
after a while, you're kinda like, "Yo, put up or shut up." But
yeah,
there
We're
are
not there
certain
yet.
people in the field that have earned a lot of credibility with us,
Yeah.
right? Luella Zondo, Chris Mellon,
Yeah.
and Ross Coulthart among them.
Yeah.
These dudes have delivered the goods in the past, and,
Yeah.
do I wish I had more today? Do I wish I had a more exciting topic to talk to you about? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe David Grush's op-ed will finally get out of Dopser review, and we can talk about that
Yeah.
next time, but,
Sounds good.
uh, yeah, I agree with you. I would rather get a status update even if it is frustrating.
Yeah. Also, I think our topic today is pretty awesome.
That's true, it's true. So our next, issue. We're out of quick hits now. We actually have a real segment here. Some news. Recently, we talked about how the uh, Department of Defense Inspector General wrote a rather scathing report about how unprepared and
Mhm.
disorganized the U.S. was when it came to the UAP topic. And among the recommendations that they made was that the Joint Chiefs should issue guidance to geographic combat commanders
Right.
regarding UAP encounters.
And that was
And
ticked off.
right, and we learned they had done that. Well, those guidelines have now been released thanks to a FOIA request by Douglas Dean Johnson.
Hmm.
Um, Here's the kind of summary quote where they explained why they're doing this. Said the US government has observed UAP in or near the territory or operating areas of the United States, of its allies, and of its adversaries. And observing, identifying, and possibly mitigating UAP has become a growing priority for US policymakers, lawmakers, and warfighters. The potentially ubiquitous presence of UAP defines the national security implications of these anomalies, which range from operational hazards and threats to technological and intelligence surprise to adversaries' strategic miscalculations.
Wow. The potentially ubiquitous presence doesn't really align with Arrow, does it?
Yeah, no joke. Ross Coulthart retweeted this and he said, "This shows how, in defiance of Arrow's disinterest, the Joint Chiefs are taking the UAP now very seriously indeed."
Oh. Yeah.
Uh,
Awesome.
the other thing that I think is really interesting in here was they highlighted three concerns, right? Operational hazards and threats. Okay, this is the
Mhm.
flight safety issue that everybody's been hammering on. It's an
Yeah.
easy drum to beat.
Yeah.
Hey, there are things in the air. We don't know what they are. Our pilots might fly into them. That's bad.
It's a real
Um,
problem.
uh, Technological and intelligence surprise, that ties into something we're going to talk about later with regards to maybe some of the UAPs are actually adversary systems and
Sure.
spy technology and stuff like that. And hey, we should know what it is.
Could be a
But
problem.
this last one is one we haven't really heard anyone talking
Yeah.
about
What is
before, which
that?
is adversaries' strategic miscalculations. This going back to an old idea, and I
Yeah.
need to look this up, but as I recall, um, this the Soviet Union and the United States had a call first policy. Like, the point of the red phone was, "Yo, is that you?"
Oh, yeah. Sure.
So
Oh, interesting.
if China sees a UAP and assumes it's us and launches an attack against us, we might end up in a war when really it was
Right.
just a UFO and nobody knew anything about it. So
Got it.
that's an interesting concern that we haven't heard a lot of people highlight before. And
Yeah.
it kind of makes sense that the Joint Chiefs would have a little bit
Yeah.
more of a holistic, like, how would this impact us in a war footing?
Do you think the red phone is that hooked up to multiple countries? Like, is it a party line where you pick it up and it just it
Great
rings?
question. As I understand it, the red phone was a direct line to from Reagan's desk to Gorbachev's desk. But I will admit, this is one of the periods of history that my public school education failed
Yeah.
me. I am late Gen X, early millennial. I graduated high school in 1996. My history classes covered through World War II. Anything that
Yeah.
happened in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s was just like what I absorbed through pop culture. Like, so I
Yeah.
am woefully underinformed, and I may be getting this totally wrong, but that's my understanding.
Uh, so it sounds like now it is it's a dedicated computer network link between Moscow and Washington,
Hmm.
and continues to use 2 satellite links, but also fiber optic. Commercial software is used for both chat and email.
Ooh, chat. Russia has entered the chat.
Yeah, right?
That's gotta be the
Uh,
most tense Slack channel in the world.
yeah, it doesn't say anything about China in there. I'm fascinated because, like, they would have
I
to
would
have
bet
one
we
with
have
China,
an
right?
equivalent thing with China, but yeah, I know historically it was there because Russia and the US were very worried about nuking each other when it was an
Right.
accident.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, getting
Huh,
back to the Joint Chief Guidelines, reports on UAP incidents are to be transmitted upwards within 96 hours, which, hey, all
okay.
right,
Yeah.
pretty cool. Like, stop, stop dorking around, write your
Yeah.
report, send it up the chain of command. But UAP engagement reports should be transmitted within 12 hours. A UAP engagement is defined as, quote, a kinetic or non kinetic response to a UAP intended to deny, disrupt, or destroy
Whoa. Wait, deny, disrupt, or destroy the UAP or something else?
the UAP.
Okay. What if the UAP does that to us?
Well,
I mean, I
I
suppose
mean,
that probably
a
also does.
kinetic response to a UAP, you may be
Oh,
responding because it shot first. But the point is,
sure.
if you shot at a UAP, there's a different
Yeah.
form you got to fill out, and that's got to be here in 12 hours,
It's a different form. It's a form 1080.
right?
Uh, I yeah, so that's pretty amazing. I don't love that they have, like, a special thing just for shooting at UFOs, but,
Please
uh
don't.
but also that seems pretty reasonable. D does it say where the reports end up going
Yeah,
to?
they all ultimately end up at AARO. I'm sure they stopped off at
Ah,
various databases along the way, but,
okay, of course.
you know,
Yeah, so
this was the
nowhere.
whole reason they set up AARO. They are the central
Yeah.
repository of all UFO stuff.
Yeah, yeah, dev null. Okay.
Yeah, no, exactly, yeah.
Uh,
Um, they do clarify, and this I did like, that these guidelines are only for incidents that, quote, demonstrate behaviors not readily understood by sensors or observers, and,
mm,
quote, demonstrate capabilities or material that exceed known performance envelopes.
translation. Please stop submitting UAP reports for that weird bird you saw, Jerry.
Very,
Jerry. I wish I
yeah.
could do like that, like Z Frank
Oh,
Jerry.
he's so good. He's
So
so
good.
good. Yeah, no, it is one of those things where it feels like a response to a very specific person.
Yeah,
I
right?
know that really what they're saying is this is a particular reporting channel for the genuinely weird shit. If it's just
Yeah,
a Russian, if it is plainly human made and you just don't happen to know who it's from, that's not a
that's
UAP.
not us.
And
Yeah.
that is a distinction we have seen Congress make. And that is now a distinction we're seeing the Joint Chiefs make. And I
Mhm,
really appreciate that because Arrow is still trying very hard to make this all go away by explaining that, well, I mean, 90% of what we see is, airborne trash and,
mhm.
Chinese balloons. And okay, yeah, what about the other 10%? Sean.
Sean is, of course, the name of Scott's brother. Um,
But also Sean Kirkpatrick.
oh, yeah. Yeah, that that Sean, okay.
That's
Um,
Sean.
I I do kind of I know Arrow's using that as a smokescreen, but I feel like they should be reporting, uh, the weird ones that aren't clearly and obviously demonstrably,
Yeah.
exceeding known characteristics. That's too bad, I think. Um,
Yeah, no, 100%. That's the stuff I want from you. And
yeah.
it makes sense that they're going to end, even with guidelines like, hey, don't send stuff that is obviously man made to the UFO hotline. Just
I
because
mean,
you
I think
don't know
they
what it is doesn't mean it's a UFO. So I,
but if
I
you need
appreciate that
help
guidance.
diagnosing it, like, I feel like
Right.
they should send it. I don't know.
Sure, but also I feel like even with that guideline, AARO is going to end up with reports that
Mhm.
they dig into, and if you look at
Yeah.
the historical
Yeah,
review,
that's true.
one of the things they do very well is they can find, you know, explanations for a lot of this stuff. Like, oh, hey, we had this anomalous report, and we were able to backtrack that and confirm that it corresponded with a secret test launch of this unannounced
Right.
prototype thing. Great, that's fine. And I'm not mad at Arrow for doing that kind of investigation work. What I'm mad at Arrow about is that they do that kind of stuff and then they only talk about the stuff they successfully identified. And they act as if they should be able to just brush away all the stuff they didn't identify. And
Yeah,
that
right.
is where the problem is. Like even MUFON and organizations like that have been saying for years that the vast majority of UFO reports are explainable. And this has only
Totally.
gotten worse with
Yeah.
things like Starlink. We regularly
Mhm.
see on Reddit someone come in and describe, oh, yeah, last night I saw a line of UFOs fly straight overhead. Everyone's like,
It's
"Yeah,
like, nope.
it was Starlink, buddy."
Yeah. Yep.
Alright. Moving on, I
Okay.
mentioned we were gonna talk about Representative, Burlison.
And
He
the secret committee.
and the secret committee, yes. I don't know why that, registered the wrong way for you. So the UAP caucus, right? Representatives Burchett, Moskowitz, Luna, Mace, Ogles,
Mm,
as well as Burleson, have been talking for a while now about trying to get a UAP select committee. Now,
mm,
as mentioned before, Chuck and I are not political scholars, but my understanding of a select committee is you don't have all of Congress talking about a
mm.
topic. It would derail the entire thing. So instead, Congress is broken up into committees. Some of them we know about in our, long running, like the Armed Services Committee, the Intelligence Committee, things like that.
Yeah.
The House Oversight Committee is another big one. Um, the idea with a UAP select committee is there should be a dedicated group at Congress who is just dealing with this topic. So
Okay.
far, every congressional interaction with UAP has happened under the auspices of another committee. So, for
Mm.
example, the David Grush briefing happened under the House Oversight Committee.
Right,
Um,
yeah.
why would the House Oversight Committee be the place to deal with UFOs? Well, basically, it's because the House
It's not.
Oversight Committee is kind of the broadest, like, we deal with problems between the executive branch and the legislative branch, things like that.
Right. And if
Um,
you think it's about, like, miscategorizing or not reporting special access programs, it actually makes sense that it's oversight, but maybe
absolutely.
it's trending into a different territory.
Yeah. So what they have been saying for a while now is we need a dedicated body
Mhm.
within Congress who
Makes
has
sense.
staffers and is able to focus exclusively on this topic instead of it
Yep.
being every time we want to talk about UAP, we have to convince the chairman of the oversight committee that this is more important than the 200 other things that everyone wants him to hold a hearing about. Um, Representative Burleson started the process to request a select committee. They have talked about this informally, but they have now sent a letter to the Speaker of the House asking for it. From that letter, they said, quote, given the Oversight Committee's role as the principal investigative body in the U.S. House of Representatives and its broad authority to investigate any matter at any time under House Rule 10, we believe it is proper for the committee to investigate and assess how transparent and accountable the federal government is when it comes to UAP.
Mm.
Given the long history of the DoD and intelligence community's lack of cooperation and transparency, it is in the best interest of American taxpayers for Congress to investigate UAP on a bipartisan basis and ultimately provide much needed transparency to the public.
That's awesome. I think it's about frickin' time.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah,
Now, what happens next, right? So someone was asking
yeah.
Representative Burleson about this, and he said, well, we've already reached out to Speaker Johnson, and this formal letter is the next step.
Hmm.
So I look forward to hearing from him. I know that we've got Chairman Comer on our side already.
Okay. Uh, so, all right. I don't always follow this, but I saw something about like Republicans are trying to kick out the speaker again. Is that like, how does that
Mhm.
affect this?
Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene filed the other day to vacate the seat of the speaker. They've already done this once, like
Yeah.
very recently. That's where the new speaker came from. And the Republicans are kind of tearing themselves apart because
Hmm.
it is almost impossible to build a coalition of Republicans right now because some of them want to burn the entire government down and some of them don't. And
Right.
trying to get any of them to agree is very difficult. According to the Springfield Daily Citizen, which published a big interview with Representative Burlison, he, quote, wants to make sure that a special committee on UAP is part of the negotiations. If there is a new speaker, they will likely need to commit to the select panel in order to get Burlison's support.
Hmm.
So I I don't know how serious that is, but
Right.
I would imagine that this is playing out 100 different ways across the government right now, right? If you see a sign in the wind that there's possibly going to be a, competition to see who gets to be the new speaker, you're going to take the thing you most care about to the candidate and say,
Yeah.
I won't back you unless you do this. What I find interesting is apparently UAP special committee, select committee. Now I'm doing it.
Yeah.
UAP select committee is apparently rising to that level for at
Yeah.
least one representative. Now, how serious is anyone else about it? Hard to say, but it
Yeah.
would be really interesting if this turned out to be the sticking point. Like, I got
Yeah.
to get that critical UAP caucus vote.
Right. Well, and there's 2 things there, like, the article says they will likely need to commit to a select panel. They did
Right.
like, they don't have a quote from Burleson saying, "Yeah, they're gonna have to
Mm,
do that."
yeah,
But the other thing is, they're politicians. They can commit to whatever they want
totally.
and not do it. Um,
Yeah. And in fact, this happened with the current speaker.
yeah,
When they were
happens all the
picking
time.
him, the UAP caucus said, "Oh yeah, I've talked to him. He said he's on board."
Yeah, yeah, doesn't really yeah, but, it is good to see that, or I don't know. I think it's
Yeah.
heartening.
No, I totally agree. I think it's a step in the right direction. Now, because this letter to the speaker requesting the select committee
Yeah,
was kind of sent by Representative Burleson, he was in the news quite a bit. There were a lot of interviews with
okay.
him. Um, when someone asked him uh, about the fact that AARO's historical report said that there was no evidence of an illegally hidden crash program, he said, I don't trust the Pentagon on this because they
Ooh,
were not transparent with us in a skiff setting. They could have brought forward evidence. They could have explained what these special access programs actually do, but they are not willing to do that with Congress.
yeah, like, a blunt, "I don't trust them," like, that's tough words.
Mhm.
Those waste of time skiff briefings really must have pissed some people off.
Yeah, totally. And going back to what Ross was saying about
Yeah.
Congress isn't letting this go, this is the vibe we're getting. Now, I will caution any of our listeners, if you go looking for quotes about Congress people not trusting the government, you're going to find them,
Mm,
especially
mhm.
among the Republican. This is
Yeah,
kind of
right.
their whole brand. So take it with a dash of salt. But
Yeah.
even given that dash of salt, what I am seeing is across the board, the people who are publicly invested in this UAP topic are hopping mad about the way that they are being handled by the DoD. And here's the funny thing. I think if the DoD brought more of them under their wing and said, okay, you got to sign this bulletproof non-disclosure agreement. You can't tell anyone anything about anything, but we'll bring you in and you can see what's going on. I don't think we'd hear boo
Yeah.
about it ever again. I don't think they're actually mad that there might be a secret program. If anything, I
Yeah.
think a lot of them would be on board with that. Oh, you're
Yeah.
developing a secret UFO that you're reverse engineering from a crash thing, and you're using it to assert aerial dominance over Russia and China? Great. I'm on board. Where how can I give you more money? I don't think most of the people in Congress would actually burn the whole thing down because they care more about public transparency.
Wow.
But I think the
So
DoD appears to have overplayed their hand on keeping secrets from Congress. And at this point, they appear to have genuinely soured a lot of people in Congress on the whole idea. And I think there are people who are a little more dedicated to the idea of public transparency than they maybe would have been before. And it makes me laugh that if you in our industry, we talk about postmortems, right? After something goes
mhm.
wrong, you go back and you kind of break it down. What can you learn about it? You do the five whys. There's going to be a real interesting one if this whole thing collapses around the DoD like a house of cards and we get catastrophic disclosure. Somebody's going to be like, yo, if we had just pulled Burlison and Gates and the rest of them into a room and just like told them 10 things, I think we could have avoided all of this.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm looking at so Gallup has been doing polls of people generally, and like
Mm,
we don't have info about how much trust Congress people have in other departments. That would be fascinating info, but we do have info about trust in large departments.
mhm,
And I'm looking at the Gallup poll for it's like a ENPS or a NPS score style thing. And the trust in the military, which is kind of what I think the DoD would fall under,
mm,
is actually at like almost the lowest point
mhm,
since um there's a dip around 97,
mhm.
but really the lowest point since like the mid 80s
Yeah.
and the 70s. It was
No, I'm not
fascinating.
surprised. Yeah, there have
So,
also been I don't bring this to the show because I don't put a whole lot of stock in polling, but, there
yeah,
have been
yeah,
polls lately showing that something like 60% of Americans believe that the government is lying to them about UFOs,
yeah,
which
yeah,
I will note is not the same thing as saying 60% of Americans believe that aliens are here or anything, but is the government lying to you about UFOs? Everybody's like, "Oh, yeah, obviously." I don't know what the
obvious.
truth is, but it's not what they're telling us.
Yeah. Yeah. So similarly, trust in newspapers is at 18%, compared to 60% for military. The trust in Congress is 8% this year.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
not good.
like,
Not good.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's shocking,
So
actually.
yeah, I mentioned Burleson was getting interviewed a lot. There was one particular thing that kind
Okay.
of blew up that I think is a little funny. So in the wake of the select committee news, Representative Burleson got a lot of attention. He was getting interviewed a lot, and UFO Twitter and Reddit kind of exploded
Yeah.
because in an interview he was asked what he thinks of Lou Elizondo and by extension David
Oh,
Grush's claims, and part of his answer was, "I don't believe most of what they're telling me."
interesting.
Now, what's funny about this is Burleson is one of the people who's pretty pro UAP disclosure and has been, he's a member of the the UAP caucus. He is out and about on this topic. So for him to
Yeah.
come out and say, "I don't believe Lou Elizondo," pretty devastating. But the funny thing about this is the context in which this quote was uttered. Did you see that?
Yeah,
Like,
I just
that
saw that
went
cat fly
fly.
through.
Wow. Okay. Apologies to our audio listeners. A cat just like flew through the air behind my head.
Yeah, that was awesome.
So the context in which Burleson was talking about this, where someone asked him about Lou Elizondo, was in a part of the interview where he was already complaining about people twisting his words in the past. And hey, guess what? This quote
Here we
is
are.
being miscontextualized. Um,
Mhm.
so in this interview, he said, "I've been pretty clear from the beginning that I've been very skeptical all the way. I was misquoted last time I was on this Discord chat about my view on angels. And so if I can,
Mhm.
I want to clarify things."
Hang on. Uh, Discord and angels? What
Yeah, so
what
he
is
was
he
in a
doing on
Discord
Dis
chat. The
Okay.
angels, is referring to the last these cats
Sorry,
are out of
this
control,
cat
man.
this cat's, like, running up the wall and
Parkouring around the room. Uh, yeah, this quote that came out last time, which again was a misquote. He said, "They may not exactly fit the biblical narrative, but whenever I use the term angels, to me, it's synonymous with an extra dimensional being."
so, wild interpretation. It's like,
Yeah. Now,
how can
obviously,
I
there was more to that. It wasn't quite
Yeah,
as simple as that, but when you take it out of context, like, "Woo, this Burlison guy's a little wacky." So
yeah,
anyway,
that's wild.
he's complaining about that incident. He says, "So let me
Yeah,
try to
okay,
clarify my beliefs." He said, "In discussing these objects, I said very clearly, I think, that the most obvious explanation, the Occam's razor to me, is that what we're seeing is experimental aircraft that are being done by, more likely, the United States military industrial complex.
sure.
I can conceive of a scenario where one military project is working on one particular type of experiment and it crashes. And they're working with one contractor, and then another agency of the military is working with a different contractor. And then you can keep going and keep going. And now, if something crashes, they're all kind of wondering, what are these objects? And so, what concerns me, in my view, is a scenario where we're paying our military contractors to reverse engineer each other's program."
Yeah, like, this idea that we're spending huge amounts of cash investigating our own secret programs. But hey, we've made sure that the program investigating them, AARO, doesn't have access or the inclination to do the job. So, so it's all still going to stay secret.
Right?
And I wish that didn't sound plausible.
Yeah, totally.
But
Um,
also, I feel like they would make more progress on reverse engineering those metamaterials.
there is that. So, without derailing us too much, whenever someone tries to explain away
Yeah.
UFOs and crash wreckage as secret US programs, you have to remember when and where these things were recovered. A lot of these things were recovered in the 40s and 50s. And I'm sorry,
Yeah.
we did not have supersonic anti-gravity, like
Yeah.
breaking the sound barrier, from orbit kind of shit going on in the 40s. We
Yeah.
just didn't, and neither did
Didn't
the Russians.
Nope.
So in that context, that's what he was talking about. Someone then asks what he was doing to make sure he's not being purposely misled by people like Lou Elizondo.
Interesting.
And Burleson says, right, I don't hardly believe anything they tell me. This is why I was pretty blunt at the beginning of all of this. I'm from Missouri, the show me state. You're going to have to show me. So what I can say is that it has been validated to me that there is over compartmentalization. It has
Hmm.
been validated by the Office of the Inspector General that many of Grush's claims, while they can't verify his claims about aliens, his claims about the processes and the ways in which information is not being conveyed to Congress has been validated. And that, to me, is enough. I owe it to the American people to be responsible and follow through.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So that's kind of what I was saying earlier. I see why
Mhm.
you made that callback. But even if it's not aliens, woo,
Even if it's new science, still a
yep.
very exciting. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And, that's kind of the theme of this episode today is, we've got a little bit of, a little bit of news stories that are kind of coming back to this idea that maybe it is a secret US program. And I've
Hmm.
been trying to be very clear from the beginning. I don't know that it's not,
Yeah.
but I do think that there are a lot of things you have to explain if you go the route of secret US or Russian technology that are
Yeah.
as difficult to explain as the challenges that you have with the extraterrestrial hypothesis, right? When someone says, "Oh, I don't buy the ET hypothesis because how do you overcome this light speed and why do they crash and, all that kind of stuff." Yeah, those are questions we need to look into those and explain because it doesn't make a lot of sense. But it also doesn't make a lot of sense that, you know, we've got this insanely advanced black ops tech that is harassing our own ships and crashing and being recovered. Like, there are equal
Yeah.
problems that you have to address either way. Um,
Yeah.
so speaking of, this brings us to our final segment today.
Okay.
Um, there have been reports of drone swarms around
Hmm.
military assets for a few years now. Um,
Okay.
and I haven't brought this to the show before because while it does get discussed in the UFO community, um, frankly, a lot of these, you go read the article and they're like, the report said quadcopter. I'm like, okay, if a UAP looks like a quadcopter, I'm not immediately thinking alien. But there is some weirdness to these reports. I
Okay.
do want to talk about them for a minute. So if you're interested in the topic, a news site named The War Zone has covered these mostly from the angle of the US military is dramatically underprepared for the threat of cheap adversary drone attacks and surveillance.
Yeah,
And
that's true. Yeah.
they make a very good case for that in their articles. And
Yeah.
they are not talking about it from the perspective of it being UFOs.
God,
They are just
I
saying,
hadn't
hey, this is a problem, you know?
yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but, like, you could
Mhm.
totally have a commercial drone with a grenade on it.
And it's happened. There have been
Yeah?
assassination attempts, there have been
Wow,
surveillance going on, like, this is
that's
the real
crazy.
world. This is no longer a
Yeah.
hypothetical thing. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Your your video has frozen, and you're
Ah.
you're making this face. Just anyway, you're back now.
I wish I could fix
Um,
it, but I don't know how that works in our
yeah,
system.
so, they've written multiple articles, a brief survey of them. Back in 2020, the Warzone reported on a drone incursion over an Air Force base on Guam, where quadcopter-like vehicles with bright spotlights flew in from over the water.
Huh. Yeah, so that's interesting, like, drones would be, a cheap, easy way to spy, but they're loud, and
Mhm.
bright spotlights seem kinda antithetical to, like,
Yeah.
spying.
I think spy is misleading you into thinking that this is meant to be stealthy. I think a
Sure.
better word might be surveillance or reconnaissance. Um,
Yeah.
they were saying they had recently installed this anti-aircraft battery, and these drones flew over and were shining spotlights down on, very particular places, presumably then taking photos. Who
I
knows?
wonder I wonder, though, if it's actually, um, "Hey, look at what we can do,"
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
no, totally. Harassment, demoralization is
Yeah.
a possibility.
Yeah.
In 2021, the war zone reported that multiple Navy destroyers off the coast of California were swarmed by drones over several nights back in 2019. These nighttime encounters were described with flashing red or steady white lights and were able to match speeds with the destroyers as they maneuvered.
Okay.
The article noted one encounter that lasted over 90 minutes, saying, quote, that is significantly longer than what commercially available drones can sustain.
Okay, that's interesting. So, I looked up some of this stuff in here,
Mhm.
and, like, destroyers are hitting, like, I don't know, 25 to 40 miles an hour, which is fast, but quads can do it, handily. The thing that is challenging is the duration, like,
Mhm.
high-end quads are usually, I don't know, 30 minutes, and
Mhm.
that includes coming back.
Yep.
Um, but there's also, like, some of the US military fixed wing drones operate for 6 to 8 hours.
Yeah.
So but
No,
they're fixed
you've hit
wing.
the nail on the head, and we'll
Yeah.
talk about this a little more later. Lou Elizondo has a really good quote about
Okay.
the distinction between fixed wing and,
Mm,
quadcopter
okay.
style, and, one can go fast and stay up for a long time, and another can hover in place, and they're good for
Yeah.
different things. Um,
Yeah.
a note, almost all of these encounters, we're discussing quadcopter style drones. They are
Okay.
hovering in place over the ships. Um,
Yeah.
now they are
Yeah.
matching speeds with the ships, and they're coming from somewhere. Anyway, in the article, the Warzone notes commercially available drones are not commonly capable of flying for such long durations across great distances with speeds in excess of 45 miles an hour. Based on the pooled data available from the deck logs, we estimate that the drones traversed at least 100 nautical miles in the July 14th incident. Furthermore, the drones were able to locate and catch a destroyer traveling at 16 knots in conditions with less than 1 nautical mile of visibility. The visibility angle is interesting because most
Yeah.
drones still require line of sight control, and
Right.
you're not going to be, you know, driving your little boat up to near the destroyers. That's not going to go
Probably
well
not.
for you.
Yeah.
Uh, Furthermore, equally baffling, their operators appear to have coordinated at least 5 to 6 drones simultaneously. And then there's the question of line of sight control and control methods in general, which make the capabilities described all that much more puzzling.
Yeah. So controlling a formation of drones doesn't seem that crazy to me since we've
Mhm,
seen
mhm.
like aerial displays with thousands of
Right,
drones
right.
flying in super tight, fascinating formation.
Mm,
But like you said, finding a ship in low visibility does seem very challenging.
mhm.
Like, do the drones have radar?
I
Or
will also note you're
yeah,
describing those aerial displays where there's like a pre-programmed thing and it's like, okay, you all the drones have to stay within a foot of each other or something like that, and they're making
yeah,
a pattern in the air. Um,
mhm,
the deck logs were not describing a formation of drones that stayed in formation. They were describing multiple drones all operating, going to different parts.
okay, yeah,
Now, if we're talking 5 or 6, that just means 5 or 6 operators. That's
right,
obviously achievable. So I
yeah,
I think your point stands, but I wanted to be clear. I don't think we're describing like a flock of drones coming over and staying in one
right,
formation, which can be
yeah, yeah,
pre-programmed.
yeah, totally. So, so finding a ship in low vis though
Mhm,
is challenging. Like, do they
mhm,
have radar?
mhm,
Uh, which is typically large and I watched a crazy YouTube about that, how those are built. But they're large, heavy, and hot and high powered, which is not a
mhm,
thing that quads would have available. Or is there some other kind of like info leak that the Navy isn't thinking
mhm,
about,
mhm.
like the fact that most phones now are sat phones or
Yes.
or whatever. And you mentioned the line of sight thing, and 100 nautical miles is very challenging. It's not impossible though. So,
Mhm.
like Portland State Aerospace Society, when I was doing rocketry with them, we did get a Wi-Fi B antenna to broadcast 20 miles, moving at
Huh,
Mach 3.
okay.
Um, Took a lot of work, but we
Mhm.
strongly believe that it can make it actually quite a lot farther. So
Yeah.
there's possibilities there, and that was on a light airframe, right? So like
Mhm.
it can be done. But that's some like very dedicated prankstering
Mhm.
or like really interested commercial entity
Yeah.
or military. But it is
Yeah.
California, right?
I think the
Like
main thing to understand is these guys are offshore. So
yeah,
these are not drones that are coming from the beach, where
yeah.
there's like a spy on the beach. Almost certainly they were launched from a boat or, as the article implies, maybe a submarine. Um,
Mm,
if it's a
interesting.
boat, they outlined all the ships that were in the region and kind
Mm,
of disregarded them for various reasons. But the article makes a point that this sort of thing would be really easy to do because most of the world is covered with shipping lanes.
mm,
Commercial shipping
yeah.
freighters are
Easy.
not a difficult place to sneak a spy on with a drone.
Yeah.
Presumably, you know, like while Navy destroyers out on a mission in, Saudi Arabia, for example, probably are not broadcasting their movements. If you're doing a training exercise or something, it's not inconceivable that their locations are easy to find. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm totally with you on this. There's nothing
Yeah.
about this that is supernatural.
Yeah.
It's difficult, and it's worth
Yeah.
noting the difficulties
Right.
because if you are gonna say, "Oh, there's a Chinese spy on a freighter that's going by," you've gotta be able to explain a few things. What I think most people picture when you say quadcopter is some dude going out and throwing a
Mm,
DJI drone up in the sky. What
right.
they are describing here, this ain't that.
No.
But that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they don't have some fancy advanced military style quadcopter that has better capabilities,
Right.
etc.
So The one thing that I think is the most interesting here is that this was off the coast of California, and if
Yeah.
anyone is gonna have drones and the poor judgment to chase a destroyer,
Tech workers.
tech workers,
Yeah.
YouTubers, like
Yeah. Yeah. You are not wrong. Um, a follow-up report in 2022 added some more details. I already mentioned that most of them were visually identified as quadcopters, so we are not dealing with alien drones here, right? Like these are
yeah,
almost certainly man-made devices. Um, one really interesting detail is some of the drones flashed or shined a searchlight or photographic device at the ship's bow and bridge multiple times,
yeah, makes sense. You gotta do something out there, like, you don't
right?
do this for no reason, yeah.
Yeah, they're there for a reason. I do wonder, I've seen, footage of like a Navy ship's bridge before. Is there a lot of stuff there that's worth getting a spy photograph of, right? Like, usually when we think of surveillance, it's like, oh, we want to see where Russia is moving their tanks to, or we want to see, are these missile silos open and ready to launch, or oh, there's a mass of troops on this border. Taking a picture of the bridge from outside, you're not going to see the instrument. So, like,
Yeah.
it's this gets back to what you were saying. I almost wonder if it's a harassment. Like, if they're
Yeah,
just, like,
right,
flipping off the guys on the bridge, "Look, we're here, and you can do
yeah.
nothing about it." Like, "Fuck
Yeah,
you."
they've just got, like, a laser pointer and they're
Yeah,
like,
exactly, right? Shining a searchlight in there. Yeah.
there is one aspect, which is, a lot of military, assets don't broadcast their location, on, like, the common channels,
Right.
and so there are a bunch of people, I think we talked about this in DC, there's a DC helicopter reporting service for
Mhm.
if you don't know what that helicopter is, take a photo, we'll run it through AI or we'll put it out to some volunteers and figure it out for you. Um, so if they're taking photos of the bow, I wonder if they're looking for like ship identification signs.
Oh, that is interesting. Yeah. And getting back to the war zone, most
Yeah.
recently this month, the reason this is kind of back on my radar is they reported that Langley Air Force Base was swarmed by drones for several weeks back in December. Now, this one I think is very interesting because the war zone made the point repeatedly in the earlier articles. These were Navy ships,
Yeah. Right.
and the Navy seemed unprepared to deal with
Sure.
aerial reconnaissance vehicles and stuff, but they were very careful to point out it's not the Navy's job to deal with aerial
Yeah.
threats. We have a branch of the service for that. What is the
Yeah.
Air Force doing? And then, hey, here's this article about an Air Force base in particular was targeted.
Yeah. I'm just imagining the conversation like, Lieutenant Stanley, our attempts to control airspace have failed. Call in the Hawk Brigade.
What? Yeah, oh my god. For anybody who is not from the Portland region, for for a number of years, we this is the weirdest fucking thing. We had a crow problem in downtown
Yeah.
Portland. And when I say a crow problem, what I really mean is a crow shit problem. There was
No,
bird
that's
shit everywhere, and it
everywhere.
was so bad to the point where they were talking about what can we do. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a local politician. So you need to get rid of a flock of birds.
And we're not
Often.
talking like you say flock, but we're talking thousands. Like
Oh
the
yeah, yeah.
sky
A
was
swarm.
black.
Yeah,
Uh
yeah, yeah.
we uh we used to have a word for this.
Mhm.
Like it
Murder
was
of
like
crows.
crow o'clock or something.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
what
yeah.
did you say?
A murder of crows.
Oh no, yeah. Like there was so I used to work on the 22nd floor of a building, which was about at the place where
They're
the crows
cruising altitude.
were cruising, and it was just wild to see, like, our windows completely blacked
Mhm.
out.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's nuts. Now, if you're trying to think of ways to deal with this, you might think tried and true, right? Like, scarecrows. We'll put some, those,
sure.
plastic owls up on the tops of
Right.
buildings. I don't know, some kinda, like,
Gargoyles.
ultrasonic thing. I don't there's gotta be a technological solution. No. You know how Portland handled it? We hired falconers.
Yeah.
Portland, the city of Portland, for multiple years, had several trained professional falconers on
Yeah.
staff whose job was to wander around Portland around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and let their hawks fly around and chase the crows away. And it was wildly successful.
So successful. Yeah, it was so good. Yeah. Portland also had the, goat herders who
Mhm.
would mow all the grass, like, on the sides of the highways or whatever. Because goats will go through so much more grass than
It's
any
crazy.
lawnmower. They
And not
don't
just
care about.
grass, brambles,
Oh, yeah,
ivy, they
whatever.
DGAF.
Did
But
not care. Yeah,
yeah.
and
Anyway,
yeah,
Portland. Yeah, so
incredible.
I'm laughing when you say call in the Hawk Brigade.
Yeah.
You're also reminding me of, if anybody in our audience is a Neil Stephenson fan, his most recent book is about climate change and
Mm.
particularly about, a billionaire going rogue and building a cannon to fire sulfur into the atmosphere, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
a real
Totally gonna happen.
proposal that people have made and might work. But of
Yep.
course, Neil Stephenson explores kind of the consequences of it. But one of the details in there is, for a period of time, we're following a character whose job was security for this area in Texas where they were firing these canisters. And he had a couple of people who had trained eagles who were responsible for bringing down the drones that were coming in and messing with operations. And they had
Yeah.
trained these eagles. They had built like armor around their claws so they could swoop down on the drones. So
Yeah.
I don't
No,
know if that's a real thing, but I wouldn't be surprised.
it is actually a real thing. The Air Force does have trained hawks, and
You're kidding. I've been sitting
it
here joking about Portland and this book I read. That's a real thing?
it's a real thing. So, I was joking about, like, a whole brigade, but there
Yeah,
are falconers, and I'm sure they use eagles and hawks and any kind of bird of prey, but
amazing.
the the hawk will sweep under the quadcopter so that they
Sure,
don't
yeah,
get
the blades are
hurt,
dangerous, yeah.
flip over, and grab it from the bottom, and
Uh-huh.
then just ride it down to the ground.
Amazing.
Right? So cool.
That's gotta be the best job in the military right there.
Absolutely.
Oh, man.
Anyways, what were we talking about?
So, yeah, Langley Air Force Base, swarmed by drones. They, a new Air Force general took over the region recently,
Mm,
and he was being interviewed, and he said part of what he does when he comes in is he starts a 90-day kind of like investigation of like how's everything doing so he can go to his
mm,
bosses and say, here's what I'm going to focus on, here's what's good, here's what's
smart.
not. He said, quote, I was not prepared for the number of drone incursions that I see. This emerging capability outstrips the operational framework that we have to address it.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, to get back to what you were saying earlier about like, why is this concerning, right? Because I think at this point, anybody listening, like we're not dealing with alien drones here. We're dealing with odd, but not inhuman drones. Um, Navy pilot Ryan Graves, when discussing some of the things that come up in UAP surveys and military detection reports, he said, if we do have what we would call a red threat, one of our traditional enemies that are using some type of perhaps new technology or hard to identify technology that's out there in our working areas, soaking up our waveforms and our radar and our sensors and our comms, watching our tactics on a daily basis, that is a major, major intelligence
Mm,
failure to have these things out there. And because they look slightly different than what our average threat would look like, everyone wants to ignore it. If we had a Chinese or a Russian fighter jet flying out there watching us, that would be a major deal. But because it looks a little different, we want to ignore it.
yeah. Even if Arrow's right that it's not alien, it is still pretty concerning that, like, someone's able to just waltz in and out of controlled airspace with
Mhm.
0 consequences,
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier, the what sort of signals are being emitted from these ships.
right? Don't
100%.
know.
Like, I mean, they talked about the Chinese balloon that was flying overhead. Like, that's a
Mhm.
dumb platform. It it couldn't
Yeah.
steer, it just went with the wind, but it had cameras, it had solar panels, like, if you've got sniffers, packet sniffers that can monitor, frame waveforms and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot you can get just by being in the area. And if the
Yeah.
platform is cheap enough, it doesn't matter if it gets shot down.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always the thing in security, like, do you have physical access to the device or
Mhm.
nearby proximity? Like, the risk goes up the closer you are to the thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Chris Mellon, UFO daddy, former deputy
Mhm.
assistant secretary of defense for intelligence, said, quote, "It's not just Langley. Other critical bases and facilities, as well as Navy ships at sea, are experiencing what appears to be the same strange, unaccountable intrusions. Congress should hold hearings on these intrusions over Langley
Right.
and the larger pattern of drone and UAP incursions we've been having. If this is Russia, or more likely China, we have a
Yeah.
huge problem on our hands. I have been publicly and privately suggesting for years now that Congress dig more deeply into the U.S. air defense threats and capabilities due to this ongoing pattern of activity, which unfortunately seems to be accelerating."
Translation. Motherfuckers, I have been telling you this for years.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what I think is really interesting is Chris Mellon is a very level headed guy,
Yeah.
and his topic of passion is UAP.
Mhm.
He has been telling a version of this story for a number of years. There's something in our airspace. It's weird. We don't know what it is, and we're turning a blind eye to it.
Yeah.
And what I think this drone pattern problem is
Yeah.
highlighting is it's not that anybody looking at this would think, oh, these are obviously aliens, but there do appear to be genuine UAPs out there. And
Right.
they do appear to have caused an intelligence failure in that we now know because of the Chinese balloon debacle, we tuned our radars to
Mhm.
ignore devices that matched them
Yeah.
because what we were actually looking for was, you know, B-2 bombers and Russian MiGs and missiles.
Right.
And,
Right.
these devices that were either very fast or very slow weren't those. We don't
Yeah.
know what they are, but they're not missiles, so we don't care
Right.
about them. Filter them out. Well, the problem is we have intentionally built holes in our
Mhm.
monitoring, and there's new platforms that probably are man-made that fit in those, like, surveillance
Yeah.
holes, and that
Right.
is now causing a problem. Now,
Yeah.
the bonus is when you then remove those radar filters, hey, suddenly you start detecting UAPs again, and, that
Right.
gets us back into Chris's territory and everything, but
Yeah, exactly.
this is part of why I wanted to bring this up. I'm not here telling you Navy ships are getting swarmed by Tic Tacs, although that appears to
Although
also be happening.
yeah.
These particular, things do seem to be man-made drones, quadcopters
Mhm.
and stuff, but the fact that they're getting there is extremely concerning, and it tells you a
Yeah.
lot about a gap in not just our ability to detect, but also our ability to respond, because you know what you're not hearing? You're not hearing there were a bunch of drones and our sailors pointed their magic anti-drone cannon at it and they all fell out of the sky and it wasn't a problem.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
hearing they were there for an hour and a half and the sailors all pointed at it.
Yeah. It actually makes me wonder why why did they not pull out small arms? Like,
So they talked about that a little bit. There's, as you can imagine, quite a bit of rules around when and
sure.
how you discharge weapons on a ship. And
Okay.
part of it is, are you likely to hit it? We're
Yeah.
imagining again a commercial drone hovering,
Yeah.
10, 20 feet up. These things were often much higher or, hovering off to the side. Small arms fire is not likely to bring them down.
Okay.
The Warzone reports do delve into that a little bit. There
Okay.
are units on ship that are to respond to things like that. And I do know that the military has been investing in
Okay.
anti-drone weaponry, including like pulsed radiation weapons and shit like
Wow.
that. So, you know, who knows what they're doing now, but
Yeah.
the point of these war zone reports is, as far as we can tell, these things are able to fly into our airspace with impunity. hang out for an absurd amount of time, shine
Yeah.
lights on things, take photos, and then just leave unmolested.
Huh.
What is happening?
Yeah. Right. Huh.
Now,
That's wild.
to bring it back to the quote I promised you, because
I'm
here's the
sorry.
thing.
I
Yeah.
just there has to be, like I feel like I know you said there are rules, but I'm just imagining, like, the Russian, the
Oh
the
yeah.
Russian destroyer. There's, like, a competition on the deck. Like,
You
"I
guys, the
bagged
drone's
it!"
back. Everybody get up here.
Exactly. Alright,
Yeah.
sorry, you can tell us
No,
your
I'm
quote.
I'm with you on that. Yeah. Uh, so yeah, I've been teasing for a little while that I've got a quote here from Lou Elizondo about the
Mhm.
drones. It's a really good one, and I'll be perfectly honest with you. This quote is why I brought this to the show,
Hmm.
because all of this stuff is interesting. But what I had was like, at the end of the day, this is a story about a military vulnerability, and this is a show about UFOs. So
Yeah,
it
right.
didn't really feel applicable. But I think Lou made some good points about drones. So he said, first of all, you've got different kinds of drones. You've got drones that can fly really far and they can fly really fast using fixed wings. So when we're thinking about the surveillance drones used in the Middle East, Reapers and things like that,
Mm,
those look like little airplanes and they behave like little airplanes and they're remote piloted and, they fly and behave exactly like that. Um, the drones that fly really far and really fast do not have a real loiter capability. They
mm,
don't usually hover. They can circle an area, but they can't really stay in place. They they can build drones that hover, but in general, you're either really good at flying far or you're really good at hovering. Those that hover don't have as long as what we call loiter capability as those that fly on a fixed wing, meaning a fixed wing thing can circle an area for
yeah.
hours. A drone that hovers can stay right in one place, but it's limited by its battery pack. And therein lies the problem. Either you can hover for a short period of time or you can fly for a long period of time.
Yeah. So, during this whole episode, I apologize, I've been researching.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Drones are getting better, and they're pushing the envelope in a lot of ways, mostly because, like, honestly, the tyranny of the rocket equation, continues to apply here, where,
You're going to have to
the
explain
l
that for our non aerospace friends,
yeah,
including myself.
the yeah, the tyranny of the rocket equation is that the larger payload, you want, the more fuel or energy or whatever, you're going to need, but it's,
The fuel is
exponential.
itself heavy. So in
Yeah,
order to build a
exactly.
rocket to carry this much cargo capacity, you need this much fuel, but now your
Yeah,
rocket is this much heavier and it has to get
yeah.
bigger. Okay.
Yeah, but because electronics and hardware is getting significantly cheaper or smaller, I mean,
Mhm.
we're able to do a lot more. So while I was researching, I did find a California-based company which has a gas electric hybrid octocopter,
Yikes.
um, which they said their record was 205 miles over 13 hours. Uh, so, like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
No,
Maybe
100%.
it's not. Maybe we're not so far off. It's not like easy commercial yet, but
Mhm.
I'm not sure that that's really. I don't know. I
I
think the point remains
100%.
we should be watching this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
So
yeah.
to get back to Lou's quote, he says, so in order to get to a bunch of Navy ships that are 100 miles off the coast, you either have to fly there from the coast or you have to
Mm,
launch from a boat somewhere close by.
right.
And these things, unless they're GPS controlled and would be able to follow a ship, which I'm not going to say it's impossible,
Totally.
but you would need to have someone operating it. You would need to have someone
Mhm.
flying it. You need to have infrastructure. For every drone you see flying, you have to have an operator. You have to have batteries. You have to be on a certain frequency. There's a lot of things. You have to have a base for it to land and a base for it to take off. In the open ocean, you are limited. You can't just pop out of the water. You have to expect that you're going to have to launch from another boat.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's it's true, and it's concerning that there's probably another boat out there,
Mhm.
or
Or a
something,
submarine. Yeah.
or a submarine, yeah,
And then Lou
or
delivered
a balloon.
what I thought was the real kicker. He said, and not a single one of these drones have been shot down. Not a single one of them have ever been recovered from the ocean. Not a single one of them has had a mechanical issue. Not a single one of them has been intercepted.
Ooh, okay.
That's
That's
pretty wild. Now, I
mhm,
admit there's a big difference between a reinforced military
yeah.
advanced prototype drone and like your DJI drone, but like what's the one thing you hear about from drone pilots? They crash all the goddamn
All the
time.
time. Yeah. Yeah, like,
The
that
idea that
alone is
swarms of them have been harassing our Navy ships and Air Force bases for years, and not one of them has been taken down or crashed or malfunctioned.
that does seem suspicious.
We're back in stretching the realm of credibility again, right? I'm not
You know
saying they're alien, but you're talking about a leap here.
yeah, 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 but to your point, I don't think it's aliens. I don't think they would make quadcopters.
Yeah. Although you have to admit, it would be the perfect cover.
Yeah, yep, that was it all
I
along.
Yeah, if I was an alien race surveilling the public, I would make, quadcopters, I would make, like, Volkswagen buses,
Uh-huh.
like, what are the things people are gonna be, like, least excited to see? A Volkswagen bus isn't even the right thing, like, silver Lexus, or,
Yeah, right.
it's a Saturn.
Yeah, 100%. It'd just be
Yeah.
like the
How do you
family
blend that?
economy car.
Exactly, yeah.
Shit.
Oh, man. So, yeah, they're probably not alien, but I also wanted to be clear that it's not quite as simple as just saying, "Oh, they're man."
Uh,
Yeah, they're man-made, but they're weird for
mhm.
drones. Doesn't mean
Yeah,
it's impossible, but to get back to the earlier points, someone has made some pretty significant advances in quadcopter technology.
yep,
Someone is doing weird things with them, and
yeah,
they are operating with impunity around some of our most sensitive assets.
right.
That's a problem, and
Yeah,
somebody should be looking into that. And the reason I think it all ties back to the UAP stuff is, again, this idea that the US military did such a good job of stigmatizing UAP stuff that we've ended up with this collective blind spot around
yeah,
anything that doesn't look like easily recognized technology. So the instant a new form of technology pops up, we are absurdly unprepared to deal with it because
yeah.
we've collectively trained everyone to ignore anything out of the ordinary.
Yep, totally.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for joining us on It's a Very Exciting Time. You can find show notes and more on our website, veryexcitingtime.com, as well as links to our social media accounts.
And you can email us at Scott or Chuck at veryexcitingtime.com. And if you'd like to support the show, please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/veryexcitingtime.
And Chuck, as always, my wife thanks you for listening to me talk about UFOs so she doesn't have to.